Buckle up, Buttercup, because there are no limits here. Ryan and Sophie, ready to dive into some seriously good reads that'll help you kick stress to the curb.
I'm ready. It's amazing how just taking the time to read and reflect can make a world of difference, you know?
Right. It's like building up a mental toolkit, kind of like we're doing today with these 5 awesome books we're going to unpack.
Love that. So what's first on our stress-busting bookshelf?
First up, we've got Chatter, The Voice in Our Head, Why It Matters, and How to Harness It by Ethan Kross. Ever feel like you have that inner voice that just won't quit? That's the chatter he's talking about.
We've all been there, right? But Dr. Cross really digs into the why, like why that inner critic can have such a grip on our emotions, and he's got the research to back it up.
Okay, so it's not just me then, that's good to know. But how do we actually quiet that voice down? Asking it nicely doesn't usually do the trick.
Right. It's less about silencing it completely and more about changing how we talk to ourselves. Dr. Cross has this technique called distanced self-talk. It sounds kind of out there, but...
Distanced self-talk. Okay, I'm intrigued, but you're going to have to explain that one.
So imagine this. Instead of beating yourself up with, I can't believe I messed that up, you say, your name, you made a mistake. Everyone does. It's like talking to a friend.
Gotta admit, that feels strange to say, but there's something kind of freeing about it too.
Exactly. It's like you're creating some breathing room between you and that harsh inner critic. You're offering yourself a little more compassion, kind of like you would a friend, right?
Yeah, I like that. So instead of those negative thoughts taking over, you're stepping back and seeing things from a new perspective.
Exactly. And this whole idea of reframing our thoughts, that's actually a core principle in cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Right, CBT. It's all about recognizing those unhelpful thought patterns and changing them up.
Yep. And what I love about Chatter is that it makes these CBT techniques really accessible. You don't need to be in therapy to get something out of it.
I love that. It's like giving yourself a crash course in understanding and managing that inner world.
Okay.
Ready to switch gears to our next book?
Absolutely. Bring it on. What we got?
All right, so our next pick is a true classic in mindfulness. Wherever you go, there you are. Mindfulness Meditation in Everyday Life by Jon Kabat-Zinn.
Oh, that's a good one. I feel like a lot of people hear mindfulness and they think, oh, that's not for me. I can't sit still that long. But Kabat-Zinn really breaks it down so beautifully.
He really does.
Yeah.
And he would know. I mean, he's a pioneer in the field, right? He developed mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Exactly. MBSR, and that program is used by therapists and hospitals all over the world. I mean, talk about proven results. One of the things I really appreciate about Wherever You Go, There You Are, is he explains the how and the why of mindfulness without all the complicated jargon.
Totally. He makes it clear that mindfulness isn't just about relaxing, it's about being present in this moment, without all the judgment. And that, my friends, can be life-changing when it comes to handling stress.
It really can. He talks about how often our minds are stuck, either dwelling on the past or worrying about the future, and mindfulness is like this gentle nudge, bringing us back to the here and now.
Which, let's be real, is something we could all use a little more of, especially when we're feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that really struck me in this book was, it's that story Kabat-Zinn tells about those patients dealing with chronic pain. They were so skeptical about mindfulness at first, but then as they started practicing, they actually started to find some relief. It wasn't that the pain vanished, but they learned how to change how they related to it. It's like, even with those really tough things we face, mindfulness can still be a huge help.
Totally. And it highlights that mindfulness isn't about reaching this state of pure bliss where nothing bothers us. It's more about being present with whatever comes up without letting our thoughts and emotions run the show. Ready for a bit of a different perspective?
Hit me with it. I'm all ears.
All right. So our next read, Rest is Resistance. A Manifesto by Tricia Hersey really flips the script on this whole productivity obsession we've got going on.
It's like a rallying cry for anyone who feels pressure to be on 24/7, you know.
Exactly. Tricia Hersey, she's the one behind the NAP ministry, and she makes this powerful argument that choosing rest, especially for those who've been denied it, it's actually a radical act.
It's like she's saying, hey, it's okay to slow down, to recharge. Your worth isn't tied to how much you can cram into a day.
Yes. And it really makes us rethink this whole idea of rest, right? It's not laziness, it's reclaiming your time, putting your well-being first.
You know, there's this one quote from the book that really stuck with me. She writes, rest is a form of resistance because it disrupts the dominant narrative of productivity and success. That hit home for me, you know, like just by allowing ourselves to rest, we're pushing back against that always-on mentality.
It's a powerful message, especially in our world today, right? Always connected, always going. And she digs into some of the bigger issues too, like how things like racism and capitalism play a role in this glorification of overwork.
It's true. It's a really important perspective to consider. And it encourages us to be intentional, to think about where we're putting our time and energy and to make sure we're prioritizing ourselves, even when it feels like everyone else is doing the opposite.
Absolutely. Okay, ready for some more hands-on tools to add to that stress-busting toolkit of yours?
Always down for that. What have you got?
All right, so think of this next one as like the Swiss Army knife of stress reduction techniques. It's the Relaxation and Stress Reduction Workbook by Martha Davis, Elizabeth Robbins Eshelman, and Matthew McKay.
Oh, this one's a classic for a reason. It's been around forever, and I swear it's helped millions of people learn to manage their stress.
And that's the thing, it's not a book you just read once and shelve it. It's a workbook. You're supposed to get in there, try things out.
It's like having a personalized stress reduction program right there in your hands. You've got everything from deep breathing to meditation, progressive muscle relaxation, guided imagery, you name it.
I think what makes this book so great is it emphasizes finding what works for you. We're all different, right? What helps me relax might not do a thing for you.
So true. There's no one-size-fits-all approach here. It's all about experimenting, finding those techniques that really click with you. Something I do sometimes, sometimes I flip through this workbook when I'm already feeling pretty zen, almost like I'm getting a head start.
Oh, I like that.
That way, when those stressful moments inevitably hit, I've got my go-to techniques ready to roll.
It's like anything else, right? The more you practice, the easier it gets. Speaking of challenging moments, our last book tackles something we all deal with.
Anxiety.
Anxiety. The fun never ends, right?
Right. But this book, Unwinding Anxiety, New Science Shows How to Break the Cycles of Worry and Fear to Heal Your Mind by Judson Brewer. It doesn't just give you coping mechanisms, it dives into the science behind it all.
So there's a reason my brain seems to love overthinking everything. I'm all ears. You and everyone else, right? Dr. Brewer, the author, he talks about these things called anxiety loops. Basically, it's this cycle. You feel anxious. You do something to avoid or escape that anxiety. Maybe it works temporarily, but then it actually ends up making the anxiety worse in the long run.
Oh, tell me you haven't lived that. It's like when you're dreading some social event, so you cancel last minute. Feels like a relief at first, but then you just end up dreading those things even more the next time around.
Exactly. And Dr. Brewer, he explains why that happens. He's both a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist, so he gets into how our brains are wired, but he explains it in a way that actually makes sense.
And that's key, right? Because it's not enough to just know why we get anxious.
Right.
How do we actually break free from those patterns? That's what I want to know.
Well, that's the empowering part of this book. He talks about how trying to just suppress or control anxiety, it often just backfires. Instead, he offers this much more compassionate approach, one that's actually rooted in mindfulness.
Which, when you think about it, makes total sense. Mindfulness is all about just observing those thoughts and feelings without judgment, which feels like it would be super helpful when it comes to dealing with anxiety.
It really is. He gives all these practical exercises, different techniques based on mindfulness that can help you interrupt those anxiety loops so you can start to have a healthier relationship with worry and fear.
But it's like, instead of just trying to white-knuckle our way through anxiety, he's giving us tools to actually change how we relate to it.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of all these books. They offer all these different perspectives, different tools for dealing with stress and anxiety. It's about finding what works for you.
So true. And remember, you can find links to all 5 of these books in the episode description, so don't worry about jotting those down right now.
We've given you plenty to think about already, right?
Exactly. And remember, knowledge is just the first step, It's the applying, the experimenting, the figuring out what works for you. That's how you build up that stress-busting toolkit.
And hey, never be afraid to reach out for extra support, right? If you're feeling overwhelmed, there are people who can help, so don't hesitate to talk to someone.
Couldn't agree more. All right, before we wrap up, one last thought I wanted to throw out there. We've talked a lot about managing stress, right? Reducing its impact. But what if we could actually shift our perspective on stress itself?
Oh, I like where you're going with this.
Like, what if instead of always trying to avoid stress, we could learn to see it as a potential opportunity for growth?
That's a powerful reframe. Because often, those challenging moments, those are the times when we really discover our resilience, our inner strength.
Exactly. And there's actually a name for this, right? Eustress. It's that good stress, the kind that motivates us to step outside our comfort zone, to actually grow.
It's all about finding that balance, right?
Totally. And that looks different for everyone. It's a journey.
Absolutely.
What's next?
Imagine waking up feeling refreshed, energized, and ready to tackle your day. No more grogginess, no more hitting that snooze button. That's the power of sleep optimization, and we're going to help you unlock it in our next episode.
Well, on that note, until next time, everyone, happy reading.